This is William Del Pilar, and this is The Red, White, and Rude, where politics and culture intersect. This episode speaks on how much of the news we rely on has been exposed for what it is, completely biased. Remember, politics is downstream of culture, and corporate news is a major driver of said culture. Since its very creation, the main job has been to push an ideological view, an agenda, or both. You know, every once in a while, the mask slips off from corporate media. So far that you can't unsee it. So picture this: Scott Pelley, 37 years at CBS, roughly 20 of those at 60 Minutes, sitting for emotional interviews, tearing up on camera, and accusing his own bosses of trying to inject falsehoods and bias into politically sensitive stories. The problem isn't that he's wrong about the pressure. The problem is he's pretending that's new. He's mad that his version of bias is being replaced with objectivity, as if the years of 60-minute softball interviews with left-wing presidents and hit pieces on Republican presidents weren't already full of falsehoods and bias. Yet for decades, what have we been told by that same establishment? There's no bias. That's just a right-wing talking point. We're the professionals. We're the referees. Now one of their top insiders is suddenly describing political interference, spin, and pressure to put a thumb on the scale. Not because he's had a moral awakening, but because the system he served so faithfully finally turned on him. The hypocrisy is beyond pale. He's not just alleging a little editorial pressure, he's swinging at everyone. He's calling the new management unqualified. He's accusing Barry Weiss of murdering 60 Minutes. He's saying CBS News is on fire. He's casting himself as a martyr for democracy and journalism. Scott Pelley isn't just telling you he's a reporter. He's flat out lying with tall tales like he's been in combat for this country. That there is no democracy without people like him. And that losing 60 Minutes was like losing a spouse. If anything, 60 Minutes has been the battered spouse in this relationship, and Pelley is the abuser, beating on it week after week by turning news into propaganda. And here's the part that's almost funny. If it weren't so revealing, Scott Pelley is not some outsider blowing the whistle on a system he always opposed. He is the system. For decades, he has been the polished, elitist face of exactly the kind of bias conservatives have been screaming about. The difference now is that the bias isn't pointed right where he wants it. So suddenly he's shocked to discover there's politics in the news. When he talks about this new subtle political bias at CBS, he doesn't realize he's describing the very behavior he helped normalize. He's projecting. In his world, the way he has always framed Republicans, the way 60 Minutes has always handled conservative stories, that's just called journalism. Smearing an entire ideology he hates without facts, without data, just vibes and adjectives. That's his idea of reporting. That's the bias he now accuses CBS of. It only becomes biased to him when the slant doesn't line up with his own politics. In other words, what you and I have experienced for years as an obvious left-wing filter, he experiences as the neutral, unbiased baseline. To really see how big this is, you have to know the backstory. What actually happened inside CBS that blew all of this up? Scott Pelley wasn't some fill-in weekend anchor. He was a veteran CBS News reporter, the former anchor of the CBS Evening News, and for years one of the main correspondents on 60 Minutes. Inside that building, he was one of their biggest propaganda mouthpieces, pushing progressive ideology as the only ideology that could save humanity. He's our savior, people. That's why inside that bubble, he was treated as one of the serious adults of legacy news, the guy you rolled out when you needed gravitas and credibility. The only problem is, the only people still giving him that credibility were an ever-shrinking left-wing audience. The conservative base that made 60 Minutes a monster 30 years ago walked away a long time ago. That's why we get what comes next, the management shakeup. CBS brings in Barry Weiss as the new editor-in-chief of CBS News with a mandate to rebuild trust and reset the culture. One of her first big moves is at 60 Minutes itself. She replaces longtime executive producer Tanya Simon with Nick Bilton, a tech journalist and filmmaker with little traditional TV news background. The message to the old guard is loud and clear. Your era is over. There's a new regime in charge. On Bilton's very first big all-hands meeting with the 60 Minutes staff, everything explodes. In a packed conference room, Pelley lights him up. Bang! According to people in the room, he calls Barry Weiss murdering 60 Minutes. He says she's not qualified for the job she's been handed. He dismisses Bilton's resume as slender qualifications. He presses them on why veteran correspondents and producers have been fired, why beloved leaders have been pushed out, and what exactly this new direction is supposed to be. The back and forth gets so heated that the meeting has to be cut short. This is a man so oblivious to reality, he truly has no clue. That's what happens when you live in a bubble as long as Scott Pelley has. The next day, the hammer drops. CBS fires Scott Pelley for cause. In the termination letter, Nick Bilton accuses him of showing remarkable incivility and contempt, of open hostility toward the future of the show, of undermining leadership on day one. This isn't a quiet retirement or a polite, "We thank you, Scott, for your service." This is, "You're out, effective immediately, and here's a paper trail to justify it." For some reason, elitists, and frankly, a lot of entitled Americans believe they can spew hate, undermine leadership, and be an ass with no repercussions. Then, when the repercussions hit, they suddenly become the victim. That's the progressive mindset. That's a Democratic Party mindset. That's the victim mentality. But Scott Pelley doesn't just sneak away. He goes on offense because he's Scott Pelley, damn it. And in his mind, he's too important to be forgotten. Never realizing most people outside of CBS and the media world had no clue who he was. The days when everyone knew their network anchor, the Cronkites of the world, ended with Dan Rather's infamous 60 Minutes Bush National Guard scandal. In the days and weeks after Pelley's firing, he hits the interview circuit with a very different story. In his version, this wasn't about ego or insubordination. This was about him refusing to corrupt a politically sensitive story at the demand of new management. He says he was instructed to inject falsehoods and bias into a report, to present unverified claims as fact, and that he refused to put a thumb on the scale. In his telling, that is the real reason he was shown the door. Yet he never offered proof, not one email, not one recording, not one video. Then again, that's the typical Scott Pelley investigative journalism. Big accusations, light receipt. So now you've got two competing narratives. On one side, CBS saying, we fired a poisonous, insubordinate anchor who trashed his bosses in front of the entire staff and showed no interest in helping the show move forward. On the other side, Scott Pelley saying, I was punished for refusing to lie to you, the audience. Which story is closer to the truth? Is this a rogue anchor who couldn't handle losing control of the franchise he thought he own? Or is it a veteran reporter who has spent his entire career inside a biased system, finally admitting, without realizing it, just how political that system really is when it turns its guns on him? Spoiler alert, it's a guy who's lived in the bubble for so long, he has no idea how biased, hateful, poisonous, and insubordinate he's been. Why? Sadly, because everyone around him agreed with him. And it's a management team that's finally cleaning house. Not because they're saints, but because his version of bias is no longer sustainable. Maybe the more important question is this: what does this fight actually tell us about CBS, 60 Minutes, and the entire legacy media project that has been lecturing the rest of us about truth and democracy for years? That's where we're going today. And with that, let's bring in our guest, author, healthcare advocate, activist, and current school board trustee for the Rancho Santa Fe School District, the beautiful Ms. Annette Ross. Senorita, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty busy. I've been doing a lot of research on this story. This
Okay.
story was an Annette request. The timeline's a little, it's about a couple weeks old, which kind of proves Annette how important Scott Pelley really was. Not very, but I wanted to take about approximately 40 to 50 minutes here
Okay.
to go into a deep dive with it.
Okay.
This is your story. This was your request. I want to hear what you think about it. Give me your initial thoughts on the Pelley case, on my intro, on whatever, some general thoughts before we start getting into the weeds that the audience really wants to hear.
Yeah. Well, I learned about it like everybody else on the news, and then I watched him interviewed with Lulu from the New York Times. And I thought that was a very interesting interview. I don't know if you know that I know Scott Pelley. I don't think I've ever told you that, but I've met him several times. And you know what? He's a nice guy. In
They're
this
all nice on the surface.
Yes, I know. In this interview, though, I thought he came off and how he is behaved is a little bit like a petulant child. Uh, I hate to say that for somebody that I think is a really nice person, but
For a guy who's almost 80.
yeah, he is sort of acted that way, and he was very smug in the interview. He was very, and I thought he was completely, and has shown to be himself to be completely out of touch. That was the most shocking thing of all, because I think the perception is in the news that people are in touch and they have an idea of what. Even his comment that he didn't know who Barry Weiss was spoke volumes to me. I'm like, what rock have you been hiding underneath? So I thought,
No, you're right. Barry Weiss, for the audience, is a respected former New York Times editor, I want to say.
yeah,
But the New York Times went so left, she starts to look moderate. People, Barry Weiss is a leftist. She is a progressive.
yes,
She
he
is
is.
not a conservative. She is not an ideological person who sees life as we do. However, she is what is a dying breed. She is one of the last of the moderate leftists, especially when it comes to news journalism. So, Annette,
Yes.
does this look like a political and ideological purge the Weissmeister is doing?
Yeah. You know what? I found that to be super, super interesting, the way that Scott Pelley described what was going on. He came out basically verbatim and said that now Barry Weiss is trying to show Trump's side of things more. She is basically being controlled and needing to show this one point of view. And here they've been so balanced and fair this whole time. And now someone's coming in, like, come in and talk about ICE and talk about that accident where that woman was killed and shot.
Right, we're going to get into that the
We're
very
gonna talk
next
about.
segment.
I understand. So she basically, and I want to go into a deeper dive on that. He made that comment. He accused her of coming out basically with Trump propaganda and then infusing that into the way they do stories.
Oh,
I-
yeah, well,
That was
that's his whole shtick.
That was his accusation, right? That was his accusation.
And we're going to talk about the video here in a moment, but before we get to that, is Pelley just making this up in your eyes? And if so, would CBS be scrambling this hard to control the narrative? I guess what I'm asking here is,
Yeah.
if Pelley were just making this up, which
Hmm.
many of us believe, would CBS just be scrambling this hard to control the narrative? I think he who controls the narrative is he who wins the war. So I think CBS coming out with their side is perfectly acceptable. But some people are saying, well, if it wasn't true, why CBS defending itself so defiantly?
No, I don't think that he is lying. I think he believes what he's saying. Doesn't that
Well, you can believe what you're saying and
right?
still be lying. I
Well,
mean, Hitler thought he was of the superior race. He
I don't.
believed that.
True. Okay, but I don't think it's delusional in that way. I think he feels like they've come in and they're trying to change something that he values, believes in, and he is self-important and believes that the show is extremely important and has had this very important history. He's trying to protect that in some ways. I actually think the show is very important. It's been like an iconic staple of news journalism for such a very long time, so I don't disagree with him on that point. Um, but I think that he
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
I think
Let me do a follow up here real quick on that point.
sure.
So, back in the day, 30 million viewers every week,
Yeah.
especially after football season, 30,
Right.
40 million viewers.
I
The
think Jackie
last,
Hewitt was the executive producer back in the day.
it doesn't matter who was, it's when
Okay.
they still believed in journalism. One of the episodes I will never forget. There's two episodes, and I just want to briefly get into one. Is the classic? They go undercover to the auto parts with a perfect car to the deal to the mechanic. Well, it's always a redneck. Well, there, buddy, my name's Bubba. I'll take care of you. You need a new carburetor, and boom, busted. Great. And what's ironic is, in today's world,
Mhm.
they now view that as not journalism. Why? Well, James O'Keefe does that very well. So, but that's not journalism. But when they did it, but getting back to my point is, that's when they were iconic, when they did stuff like that. But since then, over the last 20 years, they lose 50% of their audience after the NFL season. It's just gone. So they'll get 16 million viewers after the NFL season. That's down to single digits. We are in a country of 350 million people, 380 million when you count
Mhm.
illegals. And my point
Yeah.
is, 8,350 to 60 million people. They are no longer iconic. They are living off their past success, off their reputation. And if anything, they are diminishing that reputation. Quick response to that before we get to the Renee Good video.
Okay, I agree with you that the brand was diminishing. They were the cornerstone at one point, and I think they were the gold standard as well. I think that other news journalism wanted to match their integrity, and they had look at the days of Mike Wallace. So I'm always gonna. I have a little bit of a bias here, where I'm going to defend 60 Minutes for some of the people that I have known over the years that I so admire and believe care deeply about getting stories right. I really believe some of those people, and it's not everybody. And that's not to say that the show wasn't in a transition or even a downward spiral. I thought it was interesting that Scott Pelley argued that Tanya Simon had brought up the numbers. I did not know that. That was news to me. Because if
Yeah,
anything,
and that's cyclical. Trump's in power now.
yeah, if
So that's
anything, it
going
had
to
fallen
happen.
off my radar. For
Yeah.
me personally, it had fallen off my radar a little bit, and it had lost some of its like journalistic integrity. So I was not the viewer that I used to be.
Right. So my question to you is, did
Yep.
you work with any of these people?
I know them personally, some of them.
Okay, so knowing somebody and working with them is apples and oranges.
That's
I
true.
used to tell people, you want to work for me, the person you're talking to, the person you're joking with, the person you got to have drinks, you have dinner, you go to conventions. That's not me in the office. I'm a different person
Correct.
in the office. I will drive you to be the best you can to the point you hate me. I don't purposely do that, but that's the effect I tend to have because I want things done right. And my point to you isn't to denigrate you. Please forgive me. I'm not saying that. But knowing somebody who's nice versus working with them, you don't really know how they work. In the military, I used to tell a lot of the people working right under me or who were my peers, the same rank, I go, bro, yeah, I can have a beer with you, but you suck as a coworker. I'd never work with you if I had my choice. And they were stunned when I would say that. I just had it with their laziness, trying to skate. In the military, you can do that a lot. You do it easily. Yeah. So I just want to bring that to the point and I don't want you to conflate the two because Scott Pelley, very dignified, very. I told you I was on a boat with a billionaire because I was invited. That guy's super nice, but I'm sure he would throw me under the bus in a heartbeat to get whatever he wanted. And that's all I'm trying to say.
No, and you're right. And I think that, to the point, I'd met him, and socially in a very, very, what is that, acquaintance type of way. I'm not speaking for him in terms of his own integrity. Obviously, he comes off as very self-important, and that's not a quality that I really admire in individuals. I'm saying other people that I have over the years maybe known in that industry and at that show, I did find have personal integrity. And I do think that transfers into the workplace as well.
I think the workplace takes a culture. You start hiring like-minded. The people who aren't like-minded stay quiet until they get fed up and then they move on. And I think that's what has happened with 60 Minutes. That's why it's dead in the water. That's why its ratings aren't really growing. Why they lose 50% of their ratings is because people turn the channel because they can tell, damn, he's pretty hard on Trump. Man, he was really nice to Obama. What's that? He's taking his knee pads off with Obama?
Well, okay.
All right, let's get to the Renee Good. So this is what he said about Renee Good.
Yes.
Which I found extremely ironic. Let me hit screen. All righty. Give me a thumbs up if
Barry
you can hear
Weiss sends an email to my boss, Tanya Simon. Two of the things in the email include, can we make the protesters look more violent? Now, I'm paraphrasing. I don't have the quote, but that's what was communicated to me.
Red flag number one, he's a reporter, does not have the email. He's paraphrasing. Toss that out the window in a court of law. That's hearsay, Your Honor. Quick thoughts before I keep rolling. He doesn't have any evidence.
Right. He's got no context for it. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay.
And the other thing was Renee Good's car. You need to describe her as driving toward the officer. This is not what you see on the video.
Okay.
She got him on that. Lulu got him on that, though, I thought.
Okay, we'll keep going. But I'm not going to sit and say, yes, she drove right towards him. But those wheels were pointing in the direction when she hit go.
And different angles show different, yes.
Well, it doesn't matter. You look at the guy in the reaction of what happened to him, and physics also starts to play a role. So he's wrong there. And I got to be honest, side note, I love Lulu.
She's great.
She's great. She's a cute woman who has a perfect name that fits that cuteness.
It
Lulu.
does. So true.
On the video, you see the officer standing slightly off the front of the car, and you clearly see.
Real quick, that's another lie. He was in front of the car, not slightly off. He was slightly in front of the car, half body in front, half body off. The way he says it, he was away from the car, slightly off the car. Context.
Miss Good's wheels turned completely as far as they will go, away from the officer.
Which, how could he know that? Sorry.
Say that again?
How could he know they were completely turned as far as they could go? I mean,
because he is such a pompous ass. He believes his own lie. Like you said, he believes what he says.
Yes, 1000%.
But he shoots her in the head, kills her, and says something about her in that moment that I can't repeat in polite company.
He was telling her, get the bleep out of the car, is what he was saying. One of the other ones, it wasn't him.
So we have gone out of our way in our plan from the very beginning to show the protesters for the responsibility that they had.
That's a lie, because that's an opinion. So what he's saying, we wanted to show them as people who were responsible, what he's implying is a just protest, when their job is just to cover the protest. But he's injecting that's a moment where he doesn't realize he's injecting his ideology.
He's giving it away. Yes.
And look at him. Oh, I'm going to cry.
No, he
had already scrubbed the video archives looking for those scenes. But it somehow wasn't enough for Ms. Weiss. The video showed that the officer wasn't standing in front of the car and she wasn't driving toward him, but that
right there, the video, see, he's getting angrier. The video shows he wasn't standing. Now it's not off to the side. He wasn't standing in front of the car.
That's what the president said about that. And that's the way she wanted it described.
He thinks that Barry Weiss is the mouthpiece for the president.
Yes, he does. Actually, I don't think that's it.
Okay.
I think that's just ammunition he uses. I think he believes that Barry Weiss is not liberal enough for him. So he'll throw her under the bus because he's there, he's pushing and promoting a lie. And here's my proof. He offers no evidence. And if this was true, this would have stayed in the cycle against Barry Weiss. And why didn't it stay in the news cycle? Because we all saw the video.
Yeah.
At best, it's inconclusive, some of the stuff that he said. At first, he's outright lying on some of it. On some of it, he is outright lying. He wasn't in front of the car. He lets his anger get the best of him.
I think that getting out there the way he did and having Lulu gave a really wonderful interview with him. I don't think he did himself any favors. I don't think he came out of that interview favorably.
No. And one of the articles I read, and I have it here later in the notes, says, let him keep talking. He's his own worst enemy.
So true. We see that happen all the time, William.
Exactly. So in his telling, he insists there's no evidence 60 Minutes is biased. Well, that segment right there shows his own bias. But in his telling, bias is something new that arrived with Weiss and built it, not a long-term feature of the show. And the irony of this, Annette, is for years, CBS has dismissed media bias arguments as bad faith right-wing attacks. Now, this guy's saying there is bias without realizing there's always been bias. And that's why this interview didn't do him any good. It didn't do him well. Your thoughts overall on this interview before we do the next segment? I mean, the next video. No, the next video.
It was. I found it to be fascinating, and he did do a great job of digging himself into this. Again, I'm sort of repeating myself a little bit. This smug and self-important journalist who is so completely objective, and then he goes in, he inserts himself in such a way in the conversation where you're like, whoa, this guy is out of touch. He has no idea that he's actually showing you that he has a bias. It's just become, I think some people, when they have a bias, and I think I do this too, they don't even recognize it in themselves. So they think that they're being so objective. They're beyond, he's in love with himself in a certain way.
Yo, that's a good way. Oh man, he looks in the mirror. Who's that good looking guy?
Yeah, this is working for me.
He's like, damn, I look good.
Yeah. So he's lost his way there. And
yes, he has.
That's unfortunate. Because you can be a good journalist and have that.
Say that again.
I don't think you can do your job well as a journalist once you've gone far that much into yourself.
No, you cannot. Gerardo Rivera is another classic example of that as well. All right, let's go to where he can't even. He says one thing, then does a 180, he says it the opposite, and doesn't even realize it. Again, keep on talking, Scotty boy. I want to watch you, but not for your looks.
There was a thumb on the scale for the president's version of events that I felt was a level of political influence that I had never seen in 37 years at CBS News.
All right. So what he's saying is there's bias for Trump, as we say, saying it's political. It's completely political. He's never seen that in 30 years. Is that how you read that, or do you see it differently?
Yes, which just shows he doesn't see it because he's drinking the Kool-Aid.
Okay. So let's move on to the rest of it.
The bigger problem, Lulu, frankly, is not any kind of political influence.
Didn't he just say it was all political?
Yes, he did.
Okay, let's go on.
The problem was the incompetence. You don't break a deadline. Now, this is 4 hours after. That episode of 60 Minutes came within 19 minutes of not making air.
So what he's saying is, you're talking about an episode she pulled, Barry Weiss pulled, because it wasn't objective.
Mm-hmm.
And he's upset because you don't do that. So I've ran and owned a company that was time-sensitive sports. And that's one of the things you loathe. You're like, oh my God, we got the deadline. They're waiting for it. Pull it. We can't go out with that. It's one of the hardest decisions you make. But in good journalism, you take the hit and you go to your audience. Guys, we apologize. We promise you it's going to be 8 hours from now as you're feverishly working to correct it. In his world, you don't do that, but only because the bias is in his favor. Had it not been in his favor, he would have been the first, in my opinion, to want to pull the report. Your thoughts on that? So actually, let me ask you what I call living in the bubble question here. So he says he's never seen political bias at CBS or 60 Minutes until now under Weiss. So that comment alone, never seen political bias anywhere. He's saying the 60 Minutes newsroom is the most perfect ever created in the history of civilization when it comes to dispensing news. Am I reading that wrong?
No, but what I heard when at a former time in 60 Minutes, and one time I questioned their bias and I thought that they really leaned to the left. As someone who probably has my own bias, right? So I'm seeing things through a certain lens. And I was told that they get a lot of mail, and you'd be shocked at how much of the mail says, you're to the left, and just as much says, you're to the right. And I found that to be interesting, which said to them, we're sort of getting it. We're finding a nice balance here. But, it's interesting how people would see a story and you'd think that, wow, they're showing a real left-leaning bias there, and somebody else might see it completely differently. I think that's also a true statement. When he talked about it, I thought it was very interesting because I think he can't even admit that could be the case, that they would have already incorporated in how they do it. It's just a part of it that they lean a little bit in that direction. Do you know what I mean? But like when you're...
I do understand exactly. And I'll give you a little pushback here.
Sure.
Whenever I look at polling, I always look at the methodology and the percentages of people.
Sure.
As a reporter or journalist at one time, informally, self-trained, I had no choice. That was our company.
Right.
I wasn't going to pay a hack when we did it ourselves. The very first question I would ask, I believe you. I believe there are some who say you're not left enough or this is right. Now give me the percentages, because I'm willing to bet for every 20 from conservatives, you guys are biased. It's one on the leftist side that says you guys are biased because you're sure.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's what I would assume.
Right.
But as a journalist, I would say, let's dig up numbers, brother. Something he conveniently doesn't do. And it's what you just did. You just made the assumption it's 50-50. And that's something our human nature just instinctively does. So I'm not saying you did it on purpose. Instinctively, we look at it that way.
Right.
Good journalism, bringing the news to the people, the truth to the people. I would sit there and say, okay, there were some conservative complaints. I mean, some leftist complaints, but it was 3-1, 4-1, 5-1, 10-1. That gives you the context, because then it flips from, okay, there really weren't leftist complaints. You got one every so often.
I was told, though, to that point, that it was fairly evenly matched. And because...
Yeah, it's not that I don't believe you.
Yes.
But if somebody's pushing their agenda, they're going to say that.
That's a fascinating point of view as well, and I know what you like the numbers, and you look at things.
Numbers
Although,
don't lie.
oh, that's not true. Numbers lie all the time. This is where you and I
No, the people who interpret the numbers lie.
so they can be skewed. We know that there's a lot of
You
falsehood.
can make statistics read any way you want,
That's
which is
correct.
why building your reputation
It's
is so
so
important
critical.
to
That's
trust.
correct.
All right, so Scott Pelley is the same guy who helped sell years of slander coverage, in my opinion. Now he claims new management told him to inject falsehood and bias into a Trump-era story, and he refused. Is he exposing news corruption, or is he just angry that the bias is no longer pointed to where he likes? And how do you square that with 60 Minutes history of softball profiles for Democrat presidents and politicians and hit pieces on all the conservatives? There's enough video that proves that from not only conservatives, but not only Republicans, but conservative grassroots. When they bring him on, they try to attack them. And a lot of times they succeed because that poor little conservative grassroots, that's his first big interview.
I tell you what, he did not hide his disdain and disgust for Trump. Whoa.
Nope.
You could just feel it spilling off of the microphone and into the ether, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, yeah, he loathes him. Make no mistake about that. That was clear. And yeah, I actually do think he was a little bit, perturbed that all of a sudden it's not swinging his way.
I thought you were going to say something else, swinging. Annette,
Oh,
how
sorry.
dare you?
Sorry.
I'm kidding. Just a sailor and me teasing.
You just, we're red, white, and rude. So you got to like.
There you go. They're quick. I like that. All right. So once people that you understand the bias, the next thing you have to look at is how the mainstream protects its own, even when they acknowledge they're wrong, because they can never acknowledge the truth without a but. Let us move on to everybody's favorite American girl at one time, until she had a camera put up her backside. Katie Couric.
Yeah.
It's terrible, but because she's so leftist, maybe it's my human nature. Whenever you say Katie Couric, I think of a colonoscopy. That's what that's what she became famous for.
Yeah.
So that's what goes through. But she was a very cute little woman doing her little show on Today's Show. Then she got a contract, left Today, ran with the money. No, I'm not going to condemn her for that. She wanted to get paid, deserves to get paid, and died. Her ratings, it was that boom. And who replaced her? Ironically, Pelley here, Scott Pelley. So she came out and said, hey, he had to go. He had to go. You don't do that to the bosses and not expect to be given the heave-ho. But, she brings the but Barry Weiss, how dare she? And Barry Weiss did an interview with the World Figure. And here's how World Figures work. I'll let this person interview me, or only this person. You're not going to get the interview unless you acquiesce. That's how business is done.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. That's how it was done when Katie was at the Today Show. No, I want Katie, because they knew Katie would be a softball interview. I don't want that investigative reporter. So she knows how to play, how the game is played, but yet she condemns Barry Weiss because of an interview they got Netanyahu, and she didn't like that. So even when they acknowledge they've done something wrong, they have to come with the but. So opinion writers note that these fights prove what critics have long argued. The newsroom isn't unbiased. It's a battleground.
It is.
But in that battleground, they'll also defend one another when it comes to the outside world. And that's what Katie was doing there. So, Annette, this is a twofold thought process here. So if even someone like Katie Couric is saying Barry Weiss had no choice but to fire Scott Pelley for insubordination, what does that tell you about just how out of line Pelley was? And combine that with all the people defending himself. You can't have a conversation? No, he was insubordinate. Even the mild-mannered Katie Couric has said that.
Yeah, that was sort of fascinating to me. I mean, make come on. They could have kept him if they really wanted to. They don't, but you know what? They don't have to. And isn't that the point? They didn't want to work it out because sometimes you can. You can have insubordination and you can, as you said, have a conversation and you can say, you know what? I'm willing to hear what you have to say and we're going to move on. But it was the kind of thing where he was taking a stand and he was showing, he was thinking that he was going to be very strong in that situation where he's going to tell them the way it is. And they're like, we don't got to deal with this. See you later. Like, they don't
He
have to
didn't
do
take a
that.
stand. He denigrated her.
He felt like he took a
He said
stand.
she's murdering. They're not qualified.
You know what?
They're incompetent. That's not taking a stand.
Okay, wait a second.
That's taking shots. That's disrespectful.
And it's disrespectful. But to that point about murder, it's interesting that he used that a lot. I felt like murdering your wife, murdering your family. It's like murder. Didn't you find that to be really extreme language?
They purposely use that type of language to demagogue somebody. So you get a foul thought process towards the individual they're talking. Classic jargon. Not just, I was going to say classic journalistic. No, that's marketing. Yeah, that's not the right term. I'm a marketer, but that's creating and setting the narrative.
Okay, but I thought it came off badly. I don't think it was.
No, I agree. No, I'm not defending it. I'm telling you why he did it.
Okay, maybe in some circumstances, well, maybe sometimes it works. In this case,
righteous anger at the right time works.
Yeah, but this, however, I think it's
no. He was being completely insubordinate. Have you? So I have been in the military. There's rank. You have subordinates. Worked at a job. You have ranks. You have subordinates. I own my own business. You have a hierarchy of subordinates. Mm-hmm. That's. To me, that's a fireable on the spot. That's what they did.
I want to say something about it, though. Haven't you, I've read, there was always the Pelley problem. I read that just recently. Maybe this is just an opportunity for them. I don't think it was because of insubordination.
No.
I think they probably have to let him go.
No, it was a new regime is in town.
Yep.
New ownership, new editor-in-chief. And here's what happens. Here's a good lesson. I always tell young people. If you're the new person
you and I are the same age.
No, I tell young people who are managers. I go, if you're new to the system and you have the power and they're giving you the power and you're struggling, take out the top dog. Because every one of those lackeys will scurry back to their corner like a roach when the lights come on. And you will have set the standard. Don't mess with management or we will let you go. And when you take the top dog out, that shows them. And it's not something you go there to purposely do. That's your last resort. Because most of the time that top dog could be your best worker. But you're going to have chaos down the road every day with that worker. Because once you let them speak off the cuff like that, you've opened the door not only for them to continue, but for your other subordinates to go, well, he didn't do anything to him. I'm going to do it. If he's constantly late, you don't say anything, I'm going to do it. So Scott Pelley was sending a message. This was the message I said Discovery Warner, the new CEO, should have done at CNN. Take out one of the top dogs. Personally, I still think they should take out Leslie Stahl. But she's 80-something on the verge of retiring, and she shut her trap. She saw the writing on the wall. And like a cockroach, she scurried. Woo, the 80-year-old moving faster than she ever moved out of the light. And that's why they did that. A multitude of reasons. But the biggest one is he was completely insubordinate. And as you saw, you don't want to work with the new management moving forward. You've said so yourself.
Right.
So no, I'll push back on that any day of the week. But then Kurt turns around and calls Weiss's Netanyahu interview really grotesque. How would she say? Really grotesque. And blast her decisions. Is that really about protecting good journalism? Or is it the legacy liberal elite lashing out at a reformer in Barry Weiss, who's exposing how biased and clubby their version of 60 Minutes had been for years? So my question in essence is, as I said earlier, when you're talking to world leaders, the rules change. It's kind of like us to the audience. If we have a guest coming on that's a notable guest, we will change our recording hours, our live stream hours to conform to that guest because it's somebody we really can't get. And we know, hey, we got lucky here. That's how it is with ABC, CBS, whoever, with these world leaders. The only difference is an Obama or a Biden. 60 Minutes, oh yeah, call them up. We need to do an interview. Because they know not only will they be happy, they'll do it on their terms in agreement with their ideology. So I thought she was out of line for saying that. But my point in question to you is she just showing how clubby that whole mainstream media circle is?
Well, you love to ask me rhetorical questions. Yes, I think
But that is the question, though.
Yeah.
Okay, is she protecting one of her own, Annette?
I think she's protecting, yeah. Yes, I think so. I think so. But I also think that, they're all being rubbed the wrong way with Barry Weiss coming on the scene. And I think they feel like she doesn't have a lot of experience in this.
That's what they say.
That's
what they
say. Tell me her experience then, William.
She was an editor at the New York Times. It was print. So what you do is you surround yourself with people who understand. See, here's a kicker. Being a good leader and being a manager are two different things.
True.
She was brought in there to create change. She's the leader of that operation. Whoever replaces, and Scott Pelley, I'm sorry, he's only been reading the damn teleprompter the last 15 years. That's it. So he's actually fallen out of touch with his job. So you can swing it from every angle you want.
Sure.
When I started my internet company, I was and this was in the 90s. Did I have the experience? And I built my company to be one of the most dominant, where CBS, ESPN, they were all looking and they were poaching people I had. So this nonsense, she's not qualified. I'll grant you, technically, yes, she's not a TV person, but she's a news person. And 60 Minutes has a news division of which she is in charge of. You build your team around you. Has she made some bonehead decisions? Yes, some I haven't agreed with, but she is no more unqualified than the bozo who let that newsroom become hardcore leftists the last 20 some odd years. So my answer to you is yes, she was qualified. She came from a news background. Was she the most qualified for that job? No. Could they have gotten somebody better for that job? Yes. But there's a reason they chose her. What? I don't know, and I'm not defending it. But I did not agree with the hire. I'm like, she's not really qualified in the senses there's probably more qualified people. But maybe they hired her because they saw we got a progressive person who was thrown out of a progressive newsroom who left on her own because she wasn't leftist enough. We can't change this into a conservative newsroom. We don't want to, but we've got to get out of this bubble we're living in. So she can come in and be hatchet. Plus, she built her own newsroom studio. And they were podcasting, they were doing things, not quite TV, but they were on video. And it does create a bridge into understanding. Plus, here's the kicker. She was a social media star. She used the new media hemisphere universe to break out and sell her company for 30 some odd million. What does CBS lack? They lack a space in that universe.
Yeah.
They're completely out of touch. So she was probably brought in to we have to expand. And she has said, we got to get out there.
Yep.
So, for example, Jimmy Kimmel gets 3 million people a day, but some of his clips will get tens of millions of views. So they work hand in hand. SNL gets crappy viewership when compared to SNL of old, but some of those skits, when they go viral, CBS lacks all of that. What is the most viral video of CBS that you can think of? Come on.
Oh, I actually think the viral one is the Kamala.
Thank you. Is that a positive viral video for CBS?
That's why that comes to mind. Yeah.
No. So I will not defend the Barry Weiss hiring, but I will also not condone it, and I will push back on those who say she wasn't qualified. And here's the kicker, and I don't mean to denigrate anybody out there, but if you've never run an organization or built something, you're looking at it from the outside. Doesn't mean you can't comment at it. Doesn't mean your opinion doesn't count. But it's one of the few instances where understanding how that process works, the difference between leadership and management is an analogy is the difference between Facebook and MySpace. Yeah. One saw success, one became a behemoth. And that's the difference between management and leadership. A good manager, check, get it done. doesn't necessarily translate to being a good leader and having great results. It just means, yeah, boss, everything was done. What quality? A good leader. So we don't know why they brought Barry Weiss in, but to say she's not qualified is not true. You have the floor.
I disagree with that a little bit, but I'll say I think
How dare you?
certainly out there. It's certainly among in the conversation that they brought her in for her positive Israel viewpoints, that they can somehow be interjected in very subtle ways into the news and show a bias that's pro-Israel throughout whatever they cover. And there's a lot of ways they can do that. That's a big part.
Have they?
Well, First of all,
Have they?
wait a minute. It'd be like I can't even hear that. If you don't say that is true, that will really
No.
bother me.
No, you can say that about anybody. They wanted to keep the bias, the hardcore, super leftist bias they had in there. There's enough data. I'm not saying they haven't. I'm asking, have they? She's been there, what, 10 months? 10 months?
Yeah.
And you're saying she could bring that. You're bringing conspiracy theory and
That's
trying to parlay it as
See?
that's
She is
potential.
totally pro-Israel. She was
Yes,
the one
but is that coming across in CBS's body of work? So Walter Cronkite was an ultra leftist and maybe a pedophile for all we know. He did go to Epstein Island. We don't know. But he kept that off screen. There were a few flub-ups he had that his critics pounced on, but you can count on one or two hands over his 30-year career how many screw-ups like that he had where his leftism came out. And it was mostly during the Vietnam War is when those instances had. But for the most part, you didn't realize he was a super hardcore progressive leftist man. So my question to you is, I'm not disputing the fact she is. I don't know she's pro-Israel. Everything I have read, hold on. Everything I have read says she is. And the reason I don't know, I've never read her work. I've never watched her. She may be. I'm taking the word of everybody else. I'm like, okay, so she's pro-Israel. Has that come into her work?
Wait a minute. She went to Israel to get training. She came back and
No. What I'm saying is, has her pro-Israel bias permeated through CBS News since she took over?
Well, I can't answer that question because I haven't been watching.
But that's my point. That's my whole
Well,
point.
if I were watching, then maybe I want to be able to give an education.
But you were ready to sit there and say that's one reason they may have brought her in.
1,000%. I totally believe it. Well, listen.
Not one iota of proof. So you're condemning a woman here. If you had the proof, I'd be like, yeah, you're right.
I did not condemn her. I said it's a reason.
You said it in a negative fashion.
Well,
I said that's a bad thing. It would be a bad thing. Which would be a bad thing if she did that.
I think we've had enough of it. I think we've had
from her as the head of CBS, bringing it through CBS. Stay on her. Don't sit there and conflate it.
It remains to be seen how that could potentially insidiously get into how they cover the news. It remains to be seen. So I'll be on the lookout for that. How about that?
And you should be. Then I'll be more than open.
Oh,
now that said, are you trying to tell me there's no?
Now.
But what we can agree on, because there's enough evidence, they're a hardcore leftist 60 Minutes organization. I don't care what they say. Well, we get it from both sides, or they're nice people. It's the evidence is clear as day. They are you can look at any Obama interview, any Biden interview compared to any Trump interview, and it's night and day. He himself, Scott Pelley, has contradicted himself. So my point is we could go on a massive tirade. I just want to talk Scott Pelley.
Sure.
But there's Leslie Stahl. There's a guy who retired who won the Golden Knee Pad Awards at the Del Pilar Awards show, who retired every time he did an Obama interview.
It's not that I don't. I just I had to be clear because this gets out and it gets broadcast. It's not that I don't like her. I do. I mean, I signed up for and paid for the Free Press so I can read the different articles in the Free Press. I thought she did a magnificent job with that. But I do understand, and I'm surprised you don't understand, the criticism of her coming in.
I didn't say I don't understand it. Why? I just said, show me the proof of it. In fact, I have assumed, she's pro-Israel.
Of her running CBS News. And now it's going to be
they're making a prediction was she pro-Israel with the Free Press? I don't know. You subscribe to it.
Well, no, the Free Press is a bunch of different people making their contribution. You
Oh,
can read.
well, hold on. Isn't that what CBS's news division does? They have various journalists making their
But I
contributions.
don't think
And if
she's editorial. I don't think she's got the last say on all of those
yes, she
different.
does in that news division, unless her bosses
No,
step
the
over her.
complete
And that was
press.
the problem. Hold on.
The complete
That
press.
brings up a good point. No. It's same everywhere. See, that's the hierarchy is maybe the hierarchy, my hierarchy where I worked at my small company was no different than the hierarchy at CBS. The only difference is there's thousands of layers. There's only 3
Right.
or 4 in mine, but they all have the same process. Free press is no different. I don't know. And I think until you get proof to sit there and make that presentation, that whataboutism is wrong. And it
Okay.
is defamatory torture.
It's not. You love to do this to me. It's interesting. I brought up what other people are critiquing about it.
And I'm asking you for the proof. If they have proof, fine. It's like Tucker
It's so
Carlson.
interesting. Hey, listen,
You
you
know what?
could say, go ahead, Tucker, go ahead.
It's like Tucker Carlson. No, he doesn't lie this that. Then we showed you 2 minutes of lie after lie after lie.
All right. But you could say, probably, you could argue with me that if it came to certain topics, that I might defend Catholicism. It's something that's
Yes.
very much embedded in me, how I was raised, who I am, entwined with my value system. It might be hard for me to be completely objective. Maybe that's the point. People wonder if she can be objective in that way.
And I love Catholics. I don't love the men who are leading them.
Okay, fair enough.
The
And
one thing I will say about Catholics that I fell out of love with, I don't believe the Pope is anointed or picked by God. I just don't believe that. Not after studying them and living it. So that's the only thing I won't fight over
that is
Catholics
right.
over because they're so devout about that. You're not going to win that battle. But
Right. But
but everything else, it's nothing wrong with you Catholics. It's the people leading you.
I'm saying that some things that are a part of us, I mean, the same thing would be with Ben Shapiro. He's more overt, right? Because he just comes
What have
right
I said about Ben Shapiro?
What?
I said he is an America first unless Israel's involved. Then he would throw America under the
You've
bus.
said that.
And I like Ben Shapiro, but
So
see,
do I.
I tend to call pauses strikes. I just want a great America based off my upbringing
And so
of
do I.
the melting pot. All right, let's keep going because we're trying to beat a dead horse here. So
So
let's
do
talk
I.
about Pelley's call. Yeah, see, we spent 12 minutes on this last point. So Pelley's ego, his combat claims.
Yep.
Let us talk about that. So as I bring this up, Annette, when
Yep.
you first saw that as a civilian, what were your thoughts?
I was thinking for the people that must have been on the field with him or in the whatever sort of theater it was in terms of combat, they must have a very, very different opinion of the press being there than how he describes himself in that role.
Exactly. So for the audience in the New York Times interview, he responded to Trump calling him, quote, one of the crooked people who don't care about your country, unquote. I tend to agree with Trump because once you put bias in there, you stop caring. You care more about your own version of how you see things. So, but Pelley says, quote, I've never worn the uniform, but I've been in combat for this country, unquote. He cited going to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, being shot at, and nights in foxholes filling with water. First of all, I need verification of that in and of itself. But once we see the video, I'll give my 2 cents. But he contrasts himself with Trump, implying the president has never done anything comparable. And he's right in that sense. But I'll say this, the president gave up everything he had in the lifestyle he lived when he came down that elevator in 2015. And that was everything because he has become a targeted human being, not just metaphorically, but in real life with assassination attempts that I would question if he was. I can't say this, but it wouldn't shock me if he was happy when those assassination attempts happened to President Trump. I don't know. I would hope that he was as unhappy. But for some reason, the way he talks about Trump, I don't think so. So my point, let's just get into this video here. Oops, I guess I should click share.
I've never worn the uniform. But I've been in combat for this country in Afghanistan and Iraq, Kuwait, been shot at, spent nights in foxholes filling up with water in the desert. I'm not aware that the President of the United States has ever done any of those things for his country. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You become a journalist because you love the First Amendment. You become a journalist because you love the country. And while all the other descriptions that the president used about me might be applicable,
Accurate?
not that one.
Not that one.
There is no democracy without journalism. It can't be done. And that is why I am a journalist.
So the first thing my wife said when I showed her this clip, he's had an eye job. I'm like, yeah, babe, he has. But that is Scott Pelley, Mr. Vane himself. All right, give me your thoughts on him claiming to be a combat veteran.
That is really hard to watch. That is extremely uncomfortable and awkward to watch.
Why?
I don't know if it's forced emotion or if it's real emotion or he's just getting older and he can't control himself. I have no idea what is going on.
What do you think it is? What do you think it is? Do you think he was playing it up purposely? Do you think he knew what do you think that was genuine?
I think he honestly felt it, which was the most concerning answer that I could give you.
Gotcha. I'm watching this. I'm like, I'm Scott Pelley. That's all I saw.
In every way, it feels completely performative.
Yes, that's a great word. See, I'm very, very caveman basic. When I mock, you're like, he was performative. So performative. So I can see you with your champagne glass, very performative, talking in your little circle. Then I come up and they all walk away.
Well, I do like champagne, but it's awkward to watch. It's uncomfortable, I think.
Yes. So here's my take, people.
Reason.
I served. So here's what happens. You get an outsider in, you're assigned whether it's just walking around the city, at a seminar, a combat zone. That manager or woman is your responsibility. You have to cater to them. You have to watch out for them because they tend to be dumbasses, don't know the country, don't know the lay of the land. And the combat scenario doesn't know how to fire. He's making it sound as, come on, boys, follow me. No, you're not Teddy Roosevelt, Scott Pelley. You're a buffoon. And the reason I say that is for you to sit there and even pretend to claim you've been in combat is nonsense. You put soldiers in danger because they have to take care of you. If anything, you are a hindrance to them and have no business being there. It reminds me of Bernard, I can't remember, very elegant journalists when they rescued in the first Gulf War. They rescued all the journalists from the hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
They asked them, well, are you going to thank him? No, they're doing their job. I don't need to thank him, and nor will I thank them. That's a bigot. That's an elitist bigot that individual was. And that's the epitome of these journalists who've been there too long, who've been catered to by their networks, who've been catered to by all their underlings in there. And that's who Scott Pelley is. He put his people in danger. Now, don't get me wrong. I'll never forgive Trump for being a draft dodger, but he's our commander-in-chief. And Scott Pelley, the man you're always on your knees for, Obama, let Americans die.
Yeah.
The man you sat there and gave a softball interview with no hard questions and were on your knees for, Scott Pelley, Joe Biden, let Americans die.
Yes.
Trump spent millions of dollars to rescue one American. Trump has shown over and over he will do everything in his power to rescue an American. So, Mr. Pelley, skills, Trump weighs it down and you're a lightweight. You're a nobody. You're a nothing. It's good riddance. To me, that not only crosses the line, but shows how despicable a human being you are. A disgusting swine. And that's what I'll say about that. And good riddance. And get a better surgeon, because that eye job is terrible. Terrible.
A disgusting swine. That's harsh.
Don't sit there and say you're somebody you're not.
You know what you have to wonder in watching some of these clips? How he was really feeling. He must really feel like he was doing something so important. To use the language that he used, the emotion at different times he interjected along the way in his defense of his colleagues. You're like, whoa, this is not, I don't want to say it's not reasonable. It just seems, again, it's completely out of touch.
No, I get it. We're gonna show this video on the proof. I want to show it because his videos are just great. But I just want to spend a couple minutes with a few examples as to, well, here it is, Scott, and you guys will know what I'm talking about as soon as you see this video. Oh, where'd it go? Did I lose this one? Okay, here we go. Lulu's getting some serious interviews too the last year, hasn't she?
She did Tucker. I thought that interview was great. She asked him some tough questions.
She made Tucker look the fool.
She did a great job.
It's like we caught Tucker literally lie after lie after lie in that one. That was a gold mine for conservatives. All right, here's an interesting take by Scott Pelley.
What was the feeling about that particular opening salvo to the team?
She, I am told, said something to the effect of, why do you think the country thinks you're biased? But she didn't offer any kind of a metric. What's your metric? Why do you think so? Do you have a poll? Is there market research? What are you talking about? Because we certainly didn't believe that.
That's called living in a bubble. So, Annette, 60 Minutes has a long history of flattering interviews, softball interviews purposely created to allow the leftist message to come through with no interruptions, whether it's a lie or not, with Obama, with Biden, with leftist politicians. This goes back all the way back to the Clintons and before. Well, maybe not before. I don't remember. I'm not going to judge on that. I can't remember. But so they allowed Democrats to present their case with minimal pushback and sympathetic storytelling. As he's getting older, his stuttering comes back. It's the first time the world has learned anything about Joe Biden and stuttering. Now, that's the excuse for Joe Biden being a dumbass and not remembering. Was that. So that's what I mean by the sympathetic storytelling supporting the lie. There's decades of hard edge coverage of Republicans. Look at any Trump interview from Leslie Stahl to even outside it, the last one he did on NBC. But they've been treated as hostile witnesses. Your Honor, this is a hostile witness. Can I confront him that way? And the judge left this in the studio. Yeah, do so. And they do. They've been treated, and Trump has caught him in lies. They've said stuff about COVID that Trump said. They took his ultraviolet. You were talking about bleach. So a lot of these lies, Trump has actually been proven correct. Do they apologize? No. So you have all kinds of examples. You just have to go out there and look for it. They're all over social media, all over the internet, because we no longer let them slide and pass with it. Now,
well, he won that lawsuit, correct?
Yes, he's won multiple lawsuits against him. George Stephanopoulos, who lied, said he was rapist. That's not what the court said. And we all know that was a propaganda trial helped by a corrupt judge. As the data shows, when you look at the transcripts, what they allowed, the laws, they changed like 30 laws so they could sit there and put Trump on trial after everything had expired. So they're out to get him prosecutorially, and CBS helped with that. But the one proof you cannot dispute, period, end of story, that the whole world knows, except for Scott Pelley, America's most self-important man, superhero, G.I. Joe, commando. God, Scott Pelley never saw, despite all his, how do you say, omnipotent,
Omnipotence?
yeah, I always mispronounce. Say it.
Omnipotence.
Powers.
Omnipotence.
Despite all that, he did not recognize how they tried to influence an election with the Kamala Harris interview. When they were showing the segment through social media and promoting the show, they just completely swapped out her answer for a different answer in a different interview to make her look presidential. That epitomizes the bias. Now, that and MRC has done a study. Over 90% of coverage, including 60 Minutes, has been negative towards President Trump versus 10% positive. So the data is also out there, so he's flat out lied. Your thoughts?
And the fact that he would lie, or the fact
the fact that he says, where's the metrics? So to me, he was lying. He was trying to throw up a roadblock, and he's just lying. The metrics are out there.
I mean, okay, you do that to me sometimes too, though. You ask me for, like, you don't just want me to give you anecdotal, you want actual, you mean you back it up with something. I haven't seen polls that were taken. I mean, we know some of the things you're talking about. Yeah, Trump won some lawsuits because the way they handled themselves and the way they, actually, I thought his interview, I think it was with somebody from NBC, where he said, listen, you can't have a great country with journalism that has no integrity. He's 100% right on that. Like, how can you have a great country with the way the journalism's been recently? But I don't know about that, William. Like, I don't know. I never saw CBS. I felt like often CBS was trying to get it right. I think I
never saw that.
You don't agree with me.
In fact, I cut that out of our final clip where Glenn Beck says, I never went to CBS because they were so biased that with Barry Weiss, I said,
we're talking about 16 minutes, though. 16 minutes, though? I mean...
You just have to look at every conservative that's been on there. Look at every Republican that's been on there, and then contrast that with the liberal point of view. And it's night and day. MRC does these type of studies, and they're the ones who come up with all this data. They'll spend hundreds of hours researching it. Go to MRC Newsbusters.
Okay.
They do a lot of research. It's with Brett Bozell, who's been he's no young chimp. He's been around for many, many decades, and he built MRC to that.
He's fine, seasoned like us.
I used to be
well seasoned.
Maybe because I like Scott Pelley. I look so young.
No, anyway, well, I don't really know how to answer that question.
Yeah, so they regularly release studies and analysis that accuse CBS News of biased left-leaning coverage, and they target CBS Evening News and 60 Minutes. So they have the data. They do all those studies. That's why it's out there. He's just lying. He's lying by saying they're not out there. And maybe he's never heard of MRC. He lives in a bubble.
Well, I saw, the biggest change I saw at CBS was CBS Sunday Morning. It used to be one of my very top favorite programs to watch. And it changed so dramatically that it was so flopped one-sided that I was like, I'm not even enjoying this anymore. They want to sell me something that I don't want to buy. But you know what? Right. I'm not doing it.
It's also by omission. They won't talk about one story. They'll completely ignore one major story. Because that's another bias.
That's another way.
The data is out there. And to me, that's important. Because he's making a claim, there's no proof, no data. And people are going to walk away, there's no proof, there's no data. Why? Because Scott Pelley said so. No, it's out there. Again, he's being a biased reporter. He knows there's data out there. He knows who they are, what they are.
Well, he had to at least know that the program was not getting the viewership it once enjoyed. And anybody who cared deeply, that he professes to care very deeply, would be wondering why, asking themselves the tough questions. Now it's time to turn that interviewing spirit to yourself.
Well, he's going to become a podcaster, a Substack writer. I'm kidding. He's going to drift off into nobody land. He's too old for anything. He should have been taking the passion.
Ouch, too old for anything.
The guy's 78. The guy's 78. Has done nothing but read off a teleprompter and enjoy his millions for the last 10 years and promote his ideology and be a dictator in that newsroom to his subordinates. That's all he's done. In fact, CBS rarely does journalistic reporting. The downside of media reporting now is phone calls. They don't go out, they don't look for leads, they don't do any of that. They'll call this old guy that they've known for 20 years. What do you got, Bob? He'll tell them, well, I'm not sure on this. Well, what do you think? Well, our source is saying. Since 2015, every one of the New York Times anonymous sources on the stories towards Trump has been false. Because you can sit there and say, my anonymous source says this. Well, I can't give him up, even though he's anonymous. He got it wrong. So they're not culpable. It's an old newsroom trick, and it used to have integrity. You could trust an anonymous source. Now, anything the New York Times says that they deem from an anonymous source, at this point in time, 90% chance it's wrong. Let's listen to Glenn Beck, and we'll close the show out.
Sounds good.
So what we're going to do here, listen to sections. This is an interview with Cheryl Atkinson, a former CBS News reporter who I believe worked at 60 Minutes herself. And I did chop this up a bit.
And now Pelley is upset, making a big deal. The left is upset about all of this. I mean,
can you hear that?
Ben Rhodes came out. I can't believe this is incredible. Ben, talk to your brother. Your brother took Pelley off of the anchor job because apparently, I mean, I don't know this, but at least David Rhodes had real issues with Pelley as well. Do you have any insight?
So David Rhodes is the brother of Ben Rhodes, who was one of Obama's consultants who worked on the staff who helped give Iran, for his big claim to fame is giving Iran those hundreds of millions in the pallets, having them shipped overnight and allowing Iran to further move forward with their nuclear proliferation. And what's ironic here, what I told Annette off camera, it's an incestuous industry.
Yeah.
I mean, his brother, a big wig at CBS, but even the leftists had massive problems with the leftist known as Scott Pelley. And he's asking Atkinson if she has insight. And the reason I want to show this in that she was there, she worked there, she left there. She was very influential there with her stories and all, but she hit brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. And she's talking about that. And she's not derogatory. She kind of gives it as a matter of fact as she talks.
On any of this?
I do. I mean, Scott Pelley was not a popular anchor in terms of his skill as an anchor, as well as his personality. And I can't explain why he persisted in the chair for some years anyway, because, gosh, quite a while before they removed him, I was told by a level above David Rhodes that they were trying to fix what they called the Scott Pelley problem. And I don't know what keeps somebody in place when they think there's an issue. But one of the issues they had with him was, as it was told to me, he takes his managing editor role too seriously. He was interfering with the correspondent stories in a way that was not productive. And the veterans were complaining. And longtime CBS anchors who would recognize were complaining to the high executives about you.
So in essence, he was micromanaging. And interfering with the work. He wanted it done a certain way. Thoughts on what she said?
Probably thought he knew better.
Exactly. All right.
Mike, and the very first week, the very first investigative piece, one of the best ones I think I ever did that I offered them, he censored, never aired. And that was the pattern and the story, for me at least, of Scott Pelley at the anchor desk.
Was that the Boeing story, the Dreamliner story?
No, Boeing was one of it. That came later. The first one was a story, an expose I did on the travel group called People to People that, as it turns out, was luring high school students into, it was nothing more than a travel agency under the auspices of a nonprofit using the Dwight Eisenhower name and his daughter or granddaughter's, reputation to convince children in high school that they had been chosen to be ambassadors on these amazing global trips, when in fact they were just using lists these kids weren't honored or nominated by their teachers, as they claimed, and they were getting kids to go on these trips, and the kids were getting injured. Some of them were getting killed. It was all a big bait.
Why was that? Why did he say why he canceled that, or
I never
that to the
understood. One of my producers, listen, I even found a member of Congress had sent letters out there were names out under her name, advocating for this group, telling students you should go. And I learned and exposed that they had forged her name. And I even got her on camera saying so, which she didn't originally want to do. It was a great story.
Gosh.
It was never explained to me. We call it, my producer and I at the time, the death by 1,000 cuts. He would want to change this or want to change that. Well, let's not mention the deaths. Well, let's not do this. Rewrite it again. And you started to understand. They would never say there was anything wrong with the story. Quite the opposite. They would say, this is a brilliant story. This is a great story. We're going to save it for next week. Just do this, do that. And it would never air. And that was the story of people. I don't know if it was people connected at a higher level that didn't want these stories to air. You know, that were outside but lobbying CBS.
Okay, so that story, in essence, what her point is Pelley killed the story.
Yeah.
And he did it how parents do it. Yeah, we'll go next week. Oh, I'm sorry, son. Something came up. We'll go the following week. But hey, that's a great idea you had. We're going to go. That's how Scott Pelley would kill stories, is what she's saying, what she means by death by 1,000 cuts. It was a story based. It was pretty much this nonprofit, or the face of there was a grandkid of Eisenhower's, were the front, but it was run by NGOs in the background that were travel agencies. And they would sit there and tell the teachers, they'd recruit teachers, if you guys can recruit this many students, you get the free trip out of this. So the kids were paying $8,000 a pop. So the supervisors, chaperones, were teachers who'd won the free trip. So they weren't prepared. What happened? Somebody had allergies or some kind of asthma, something bad. They were in Japan and they died. And there were other issues. Then they sued. Things started to come to light. It's a great hit piece. That's true. It's an expose piece. And Scott Pelley killed it. And that's her whole shtick about it, is why kill it? He was supposedly going to be good for them, but he was such a meddler, wanted things done a certain way. But at the end of the day, with her, she discovered he's killing my stories, my exposés. And her point is he wasn't a good dude, wasn't a good person, wasn't a good anchor. That was during his time as CBS anchor. Any comments before we move on? I mean, keep going.
Just keep going. I'll save it.
He says that what Barry is doing is censoring the stories, and I think he said that management had instructed me to inject lies into my reporting, yada, yada, yada. Do you believe any of that?
No, I don't. I believe that most likely, based on my experience, they were trying to make the stories more balanced and fair. And the culture among some at CBS, and I think it's gotten worse since I left, was not to do so. And I think they don't understand, or came to not understand, the very basic tenets of journalism, which I worked really hard. Not that I always understood this, but I really tried to grow and understand and listen to criticism over the years. Showing the other side of a story, even if you strongly believe in one side you're telling, does not weaken the story. It strengthens the story. Even if you're a liberal and you're telling a liberal perspective, the liberals in the audience actually appreciate knowing what the other side of the argument is. And I think Barry Weiss is simply trying to tug CBS News back a little bit closer to the center. But the inmates have been running that asylum for a long time, and they're not going to go down quietly.
And that's, I think, what happened, which brings up a point. As I was listening, I do remember the Free Press's early advertising.
Mm-hmm.
If you want objective, unbiased stories, come to us, because she had seen the far left progressivism saying, get on board with what we're doing or get out. So she left. So, and that's one reason they said they hired her, was to bring more unbiased objectivity. So if one of her qualifications is she had that with the Free Press. And that was more than likely one of probably many reasons they brought her on. So this boils down to he said, she said, and who do you believe? Well, Cheryl Atkinson is still an investigative journalist, still breaking stories, still doing the good way. And I think at the end there, she gave the best account of what is happening. Barry Weiss was brought in. And my proof, that Kamala. To this day, CBS, the Scott Pelleys, the Leslie Stalls think there is nothing wrong with that CBS Kamala piece. Oh, we always edit. They didn't edit. They completely changed it. And there's a difference when you edit for time snippet. I do that with our shorts. A minute short be a minute, 30 seconds. I'll whittle it down. It's saying the same thing, but I have edited it, but I haven't changed the message. They changed the message. So your thoughts on her comments there at the end?
I thought it was interesting. She was saying how he cut up that one piece and then it never ended up going and it never ended up airing. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what it isn't like in Barry Weiss. Someone taking charge of things and making cuts and making those, editorial decisions. It's funny how sometimes people butt heads who are maybe very similar in nature in certain ways. Maybe he didn't like her because she was the one in charge, and he just
strong woman,
right?
Old school.
Seriously, that was one thing that I thought of when she was saying that. In the end, yeah, I'd heard the Pelley problem before. That wasn't the first time that I heard people referring to him in that way, that he was a problem, and that she was actually just trying to get them a little bit more to the center. That was Barry Weiss's entire. Maybe she's been charged with doing that, and they'd rather go down than try to make those changes. They're resisting that change so much. Yeah,
exactly.
You know what? It's not a bad thing to change. We talk a little bit about having term limits and how that's important. It's not bad to change the guard every once in a while. You can lose your edge. You can lose your way. You can to believe your own narrative a little bit too much. It's good to change things up. That's positive, I think.
No, you have to. Business is the best example. Kmart gave way to Target, to Walmart, to Radio Shack gave way to Apple. Microsoft Windows completely lost the telephone, the cellular wars, and BlackBerry to Apple because they stayed stagnant.
Yep.
In BlackBerry, the inmates were running the silent. The techs were creating all these great new devices that the average Joe couldn't figure out how to work. That was one reason for their downfall. They weren't able to adapt. And that's what's happening there. Any final words, Miss Annette, before I sign you off and I'll close the show out? Because I know you got to get going. You had an hour time limit, 90 minutes later.
No, we're good. We're good.
All right. And this is the beautiful Miss Annette Ross, school board trustee at Rancho Santa Fe School Board District, an author who is looking for a publisher for her next writing. Tell us about your first book there real quick.
Well, my first book is Where Fairy Tales Go. It's a memoir about my injury, my family life, being a mother and not walking and having that big life adjustment. And my next book is called A California Exile.
Oh, we'll look forward to that. You may have to send me the manuscript. And with that, Senorita Annette, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to close the show out, and I will see you sooner than later. Thank you for coming on.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye. And everybody, it's always great to have the beautiful Miss Annette Ross. I do kind of hem her in sometimes. I can be a bit of a unpurposeful bully, but I want people to give me their thoughts on certain topics from a certain perspective that takes them away from their comfortable perspective that's all. So let's take a step back from the drama and this 60 minutes meltdown, because that's what it is. It's a meltdown, people. A meltdown that reveals the truth about corporate media. A self-proclaimed hero, Scott Pelley, accuses new management of forcing falsehoods and bias into stories, claiming they're murdering the legendary program. Also stating that same management cuts deals with world leaders and turns journalism into scripted theater. All of this from an institution that Pelley says spent decades preaching neutrality and straight down the middle reporting. He says it, they say it, but their actual record proves otherwise. One-sided investigations, soft-fought interviews for progressives, and hostile grillings for conservatives and Republicans. The panic is obvious. The mask is off. Bias isn't a bug in their system. It is the system. It's baked into who they hire, which stories they greenlight, how questions are framed, and what gets edited out. Remember the Kamala Harris video editing scandal? This isn't really a debate over whether bias exists. It's a fight to keep the bias in place over how openly and aggressively it can be deployed. On the other side, new management is trying to restore basic standards of honest, fact-based journalism. The other treats ideology as journalism. No matter how many lies or distortions it takes, progressives never stop pushing because they understand that whoever controls the narrative gets to define reality. As a viewer and a citizen and constituent, the answer is straightforward. Stop treating legacy outlets like impartial referees. View them as partisan players with clear jerseys on and agendas to protect and promote. When a story lines up perfectly with what one party or administration needs you to believe, assume it was engineered that way. Question everything. Verify independently. Real accountability starts with you because these institutions abandoned it years ago. This isn't the fall of a hero at 60 Minutes. It's the exposure of a machine. The only question that matters now is whether Americans will keep letting that machine decide what the truth is. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and share this episode of The Red, White, and Rude. And follow us on YouTube under Grumblings Media Culture, Rumble under Grumblings Media. Until next time, stay safe, never give in. Hey everybody, this is William Del Pilar, founder of Grumblings Media, and I want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our